How's it going? I'm Jared Gillis. Welcome to another All About RVs. Today we're going to be talking about the tips, some of the advice that we have for renovating your RV. You guys had tons of questions from the tour that we did in the last video. From that, you guys had so many questions about just all those things. We're gonna wrap that up to help you if you're wanting to renovate your RV. Here's some tips on how to do that. Let's start off with a couple of quick, easy ones. So the wallpaper that we put in the backsplash area of the kitchen, or the wallpaper that we used up in our bedroom, kind of give it that weathered look. Those were real easy to install and do. We just made sure that our wall was clean and ready for the wallpaper. It had a self-adhesive back to it, so we just made sure we weren't sticking our hands on it, getting it sticky. We have heard of people having those peel off the wall. We haven't had any issue with that, and we've been going on for quite a while. But if you were wanting to get some wallpaper like that, I'll put a link down in the description, maybe pin that first comment with links to some of that wallpaper and anything else that we talk about in this video that you can buy on Amazon. So also that map. A lot of people had questions about that map and where we got it. We just ordered it right off of Amazon. Again, prime shipping, easy to get, and we built a little frame around it. That was just some wood that we had sitting around. I think it was like a fence picket or something like that, and we built a frame and stuck it to the wall. So that's where the map came from. Now, speaking of the walls, a lot of people had questions on what was the process for painting, what paint do you recommend, how well has it worked out. So our paint has worked out really well. We haven't had issues with it getting scraped off or scratches or anything like that. It's adhered to the wall very well. And so it's not like your typical home with drywall. So what is that process? So I would first start off saying that you want to clean it best you can. So clean it with a product like TSP. You just want to get the oils from the hands or anything from like the cooking area. You want to get all that off so that your paint can adhere to the wall the best that it possibly can. And then I recommend primering the walls before you put the paint color on there. Now, we just put the primer right on the wallpaper. Put a thin coat of primer. You don't want to soften that wallpaper to where it wants to come off the wall. So just a light coat of primer. Let that dry overnight, fully dry, so that you're not keeping a wet, moist surface while you're doing it. And then go ahead and roll on and paint your walls. You're probably gonna have to do a couple of coats of paint. A lot of people also ask, what type of paint do you use? And so I believe we just used Glidden. I didn't need much and I wasn't too worried about it, but I really like Sherwin-Williams paint. I've painted a lot of exterior of homes when I was a contractor, a lot of interior. I've done a lot of painting, and Sherwin-Williams was just my favorite. So that's usually the one that I lean towards and usually end up picking. But in here we just used a Glidden and it's worked out great. Now let's talk about painting the cabinets, because painting the cabinets is a little bit different in the process in which you do it. So the step that I add in here is I'm gonna grab some light sandpaper, like a 320, even like a 400, and I'm just gonna scuff them up just a little bit. I just wanna etch into whatever finish is on there so that my primer is gonna bond best to the wood. I'm not sanding it down to bare wood. I'm just scuffing them up just a little bit to allow that bond to better happen. So clean, scuff, clean, primer, paint. Now I recommend going to Sherwin-Williams again. Get a good primer that will go well with I think it's a Pro Classic. It's almost like an enamel, the paint that I recommend for going on here from Sherwin-Williams. It flows really well. When you're painting your cabinets, you don't want a bunch of stipple or brush marks or anything like that. You just want a nice, smooth, clean look. It's gonna give you a hard finish to it so that you don't have to clear coat over the top of it. It's gonna give you a cleanable surface and it's gonna flow well. So those three things are why I recommend going with the Pro Classic from Sherwin-Williams. But if you get a cheap paintbrush, it's probably gonna leave streaks and lines. A good paintbrush really goes a long ways. And when I'm using a roller for some of the flatter, larger areas, I'm going to use something that's gonna give me a really smooth finish. So I'll just use some of those little 6-inch rollers and for some of the flat surfaces, and a good pretty brush. And take care of your brush. Clean it out really well after you're done painting. I see so many people with bad paint brushes and bad paint jobs because they have a bad paintbrush and they don't clean it out well. So small little side tip, but hey, you guys are asking how these things come out the way they do. Just take care of your equipment and buy a good brush. Now, moving on to flooring, this might be one that is more of a do as I say, not as I do, because what I recommend is probably not what I ended up doing. But what we ended up putting in here is just a click together laminate flooring. It is one of the thinnest, lightest laminate floors that I have found. It's nothing super special, it's really inexpensive from Lowe's, but I picked this one because of the height of it. It was pretty thin and it matched exactly the height of the flooring that we pulled out. Well, almost exactly the right height. We kept it just a little bit shorter so that we could put a piece of luan. It's just like this piece of plywood that we'll put down on the floor when the slide comes in. So it's the proper height, and we have an area of the slide that would scratch the floor. I think there's like some kind of rivet or something underneath there that I can't quite get to file to smooth out, but it would scratch the floor as it comes in. So we just stick a piece of luan right there. The slide slides right up on the luan and then it goes right back out. And it just helps protect our floor when we're driving, when we pull it in, when we pull it out. What I would more than likely recommend for people putting in flooring in their RV is probably like a vinyl product, like a vinyl tile that you can put in there. I say vinyl tile, it's like a vinyl plank is what it is. So usually that's going to be lighter, it's going to be easier. You could bring in the sheet good of it, but if you've never done that before, it can be difficult to put in. The vinyl planks are usually good for weight, they're good for durability, and they're easier to install, and they work really well for water, and they come in all kinds of different things. You can have them look like tile, you can have them look like wood. There's some really nice ones out there, so check out the vinyl planks. But before we move on from flooring, let's talk about that transition strip, because we had a lot of questions about how I made that transition strip from the slide to the main floor in the RV. So I think I have a piece left over from when we did that. This here is the one of the test pieces that I had made. I just took a 2x4, and because it was a little bit wider than that gap was, and then I just put it through the saw. We had a table saw, and so I cut this side and then I cut that side at the different heights because there was a little bit of a difference in the height between the two, and then I sloped this side a little bit, and then I also sloped this side. So it was a lot of different cuts. This was a cut through the table saw, this was a cut through the table saw, and I ended up angling that just a little bit, and then this was a cut through the table saw. So had to pass this through quite a few times. It was just one 2x4, and I used one side for the left side and then the bottom side for the right side. It worked out pretty well. It was pretty cheap. I mean, how cheap is a 2x4? And it's just pine, which the floor mimics pine. So it worked well, found a stain that went along with it, and then we clear coated it. So that way it's protected, and that was our solution for covering that gap between the slide and the main floor. We also had a lot of questions about weight. Now, the floor was probably one of the heaviest things we put in here. It's not a ton of flooring, but it does add up. So we still have more weight that we could add to this trailer. Not that we're trying to add weight, but it's a toy hauler, so it's got a really strong frame, and it's meant to drive a vehicle in the back of it. And so we're actually still underweight in the trailer, and weight is a concern when you're wanting to renovate your RV. My recommendation would be to consider weight in everything that you change. If you're pulling something out and you're putting something back in, consider the weight. Is it adding weight? How much weight? Is it weighing less? You might even be saving weight on some of the things you did, which we'll be talking about the Dinette in a second, which I think is lighter than the original Dinette that was in here. So consider weight on your flooring and the different things that you build and what you're building your products out of. But now let's talk about the Dinette, because the Dinette is something that really matches our style a whole lot more than what was there originally. When we pulled out, let's just talk about the benches. We pulled out those benches first. They were made out of particle board, which is somewhat heavier. We built these benches out of pine. I know that's not the best like woodworking wood out there, but the Doug fir pine looks good for what we were going for, and it doesn't weigh a ton. So these benches, they're pretty light. We can move them out, move them in, move them around. We also had questions about, those benches scratch the floor? So the benches, we did a lot of sanding on them and a lot of refining when we put them in. And so the bottoms, they don't scratch the floor when you slide it or when we drive, if it moves around a little bit. We're not concerned about it scratching the floor. The issue is if you get sand in here, and if you get sand underneath anything and you get a hard surface pushing it into the floor, you're gonna cause a scratch or some kind of a blemish into the floor. So what we do is we just try and keep the floors clean. If we keep the floors clean, we haven't had any scratches, and it hasn't really been a big issue. Now, the table we built out of the same Doug fir that we did the benches out of, and they match. That way they match, same stain, same clear coat and all that. So we put these together. We used like a biscuit joint in between 3 different sheets of 2x wood. So we put those together. We even did some pocket screws underneath there to hold that all together. I put a kerf underneath each end of the table. So I took a saw blade and I cut through just a portion of the table, and then I put angle metal up inside that table so that it will keep it straight. So it added some strength going laterally across the table, and it's just on the same hardware that we had in this area. Now, this table might look heavier than the one that was in here before, but actually particle board is some of the heaviest wood that it seems like you can put in a rig like this. Using this Doug fir, it's actually lighter than the table was before as far as the weight of it. So switching out the table was good on weight, switching out the benches was good on weight. So some of those things saved us weight to offset the weight of, say, the floor. Questions, we had wall paint, cabinet flooring. Oh, the water filter. A lot of people asked about the water filter because I just brushed over that in the tour, and we ended up using an RO water filter. I've had a lot of experience in the past with those. I just prefer the RO system. It works silently in the background to fill up that storage of water. We have a couple gallon pressure tank that's underneath the sink, and that will fill up when we're connected to city water. If we need to fill up water jugs because we're going out boondocking, we just fill up those water jugs. So if you're interested in the same RO filter that we have, just check the link in the description. I know some people are concerned that the RO actually takes out too much stuff out of your water, but if you have a well-balanced diet and you're making sure you're getting all your vitamins and minerals and all that through your diet, I think the RO is a great way to really filter that water when you're going to different municipalities. Even RV parks have different well water. You're able to filter that and have a safe drinking system. I almost forgot because it wasn't kind of the main part of the tour, but we had a lot of questions about the exterior paint. And I've always been a little reluctant to share this one with you because I wasn't sure how the exterior paint was going to hold up. So let's take a look at that. So when we repainted the rig, one of the biggest things that when we did it, we didn't really have any money. So I did it the most cost-effective way that I can find, and that was the Rust-Oleum $50 paint job. And so I haven't really shared how we did it and all that because I wasn't positive on how long it was going to last. We're going 2 years on this, so it's doing well so far, but I know that's not like the full length of how long I hope that it goes. I wasn't sure how the look of it was going to be in the beginning. We're pleased with it. Not perfect, but we're definitely pleased with it. It's an improvement for what we did. And like I said, it was called the Rust-Oleum $50 paint job. And what's involved in that is you get professional Rust-Oleum paint. That's what it's called, the professional Rust-Oleum paint. And you mix it 50-50 with mineral spirits, and you roll it on. You actually roll the finish onto your RV, and that was what makes up the Rust-Oleum $50 paint job, because you can like paint your car with $50 bucks, and people have done it, and they've had some great results. So you can see the results that we've had here. So if I was going to recommend somebody doing this or give somebody tips, I would say the key to getting it to how you would like it is prep work. Prep work is going to be key in all of that, and it will be a ton of work. Pulling off all those decals for us, it was extremely difficult. Of course, we ended up doing this kind of in the colder months, which helped us in the painting, did not help us in pulling off the decals. It took a lot of labor to get those decals off. And then I roughed up the surface with that wet sandpaper, kind of give it something to bond to. And then I put a few coats of the color on. So we just did white, and then we painted on our decals. So I put 3 stripes on each side that were there existing. I kind of marked out where they were originally, so I didn't have to try and generate or fabricate my own kind of a design, but we just kept a few stripes on each side, and we masked those off with tape. We painted over them and just used the Rust-Oleum gray, and they've been holding up well. So if you're crazy enough to try something like this to paint your RV, another tip I would give you is when you're rolling it, you want very moderate temperatures. You don't want it freezing cold, and you definitely don't want it hot, warm, or in the sun, because when you're going and you're rolling, you want to roll that wet edge all the way through. You don't want to have a dry edge that you're coming back up. So a nice smooth roller that you can just work very quickly across the RV, because you're going to roll it on, it's going to create a few bubbles, and then you're just going to come back, hit it to knock those bubbles down so you don't get any kind of weird drips or runs or anything like that. You really want to practice it before you start doing it on your rig, because I ended up having to do the nose of it twice because I hated the look of it. Getting it down to smooth again and rolling it on properly in a good temperature really made a big improvement in doing the front again. You can see the shine. You can probably see some of the ripples in there, but I'm much happier with it than what we had originally. Well, I think that's gonna do it for today. So remember, as always, get out there and enjoy your RV. So if you liked this video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. And if we don't see you on the road, hopefully we'll see you in the next video.